The Duns Tribunal then done to detail payments of £1.3 million to Charlie Haughey. Traffic chaos across London after a series of bomb scares, the IRA is blamed. And paramedics take to the picket line, but the government stands firm on their pay demand. Hello and welcome to 6-1. Also on the programme this Monday evening, the Minister for Agriculture says he's to seek compensation for farmers hit by currency fluctuations.
Another teenager dies apparently after taking a number of ecstasy tablets at a Dublin nightclub. And pot black as Ronnie O'Sullivan makes snooker's fastest ever maximum break.
The Payments to Politicians Tribunal has been told that Ben Dunn agreed to make a number of payments to Charlie Haughey after being told in 1987 that the then Taoiseach was in financial difficulties. Giving evidence on the opening day of the tribunal at Dublin Castle, Mr Dunn also outlined a number of payments which he made to Michael Lowry in connection with Mr Lowry's work for Dunn Stores. The tribunal was told that these payments had not been included in Mr Lowry's statement to the Dáil after his resignation as a minister.
Ben Dunn, the first witness, told the Payments to Politicians Tribunal that in 1988 he came to an arrangement with Michael Lowry for the provision of refrigeration services to Dunn Stores. The original arrangement had been that Mr Lowry would provide parts and labour at cost price and would then be paid around £50,000 a year on top of that. But the value of the work carried out by Mr Lowry increased and extra payments were made to him as a result. Mr Dunn outlined a number of payments to Mr Lowry, which the tribunal had earlier been told by senior counsel Dennis McCullough had not been included in Mr Lowry's resignation statement to the Dáil. They were for £25,000 paid in 1990, £40,000 paid into the account of a company called Badgeworth, set up on Mr Lowry's behalf in the Isle of Man in August 1991, and two payments of £40,000 and £50,000 in May 1992. Mr Dunn also confirmed that it had been agreed that Dunns would pay for an extension to Mr Lowry's home, up to an initial limit of £200,000. Mr Dunn said that all these payments were in relation to their business arrangement and that he neither expected nor received any political favours as a result of them. He then outlined an approach made to him in late 1987, allegedly on behalf of Charles Haughey, the then Taoiseach. Noel Fox, an accountant who worked closely with Mr Dunn, told him that the late Des Traynor, an accountant who was a friend of Mr Haughey's, was trying to find a number of businessmen to come up with around £700,000 to resolve his financial difficulties. Mr Dunn told the tribunal that he felt it was a mistake to ask so many different people for money, as news of it might leak out. He sent a message back to say that he would pay all the money himself, but it would take a little time to organise if confidentiality was to be ensured. However, following further representations from Mr Traynor, Mr Dunn agreed to make an immediate payment of £200,000 to a bank account in London in the name of John Furrs, who the tribunal was told was a banker in the Cayman Islands who was associated with Mr Traynor. Michael Collins, the counsel for the tribunal, said that this money had later been transferred to a bank in Dublin in the name of the Cayman Islands Bank with which Mr Furrs and Mr Traynor were associated. Mr Dunn will resume his evidence tomorrow and is expected to outline a number of other payments allegedly made to Mr Haughey. However, earlier today, counsel for the tribunal said that Mr Haughey had said in a number of letters to the tribunal that he had never received any money from Ben Dunn.
Well, we're joined from Dublin Castle by our special correspondent Charlie Bird. Charlie, judging by what we've heard from the tribunal this afternoon, Mr Dunn was very generous to an awful lot of people, including people he didn't even know. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Mr Dunn was quite forthright in his evidence to the tribunal this afternoon. He said that the Dunn family had a kind streak in them, and he said that from his own party he estimated that he's given over £2 million to good causes over the years. He said they went to schools for computer rooms and also to universities and to other institutions. Mr Dunn also then went on to list the money which he'd given to other politicians. He went down to all the politicians we've already heard about. He spoke about giving one contribution. He was asked about one contribution to Colm Hilliard, the Fianna Fáil TD in Meath. And the senior counsel for the tribunal asked, did he know about this payment? And he said no, he didn't recollect it, and he didn't recognise the name. He was also asked about the payments to Fine Gael. He said that he had dinner with Alan Dukes, the leader of Fine Gael at the time, and he agreed that over dinner that he would give £30,000 £100,000 to Fine Gael over 3 years. He was asked why he was giving such a substantial amount to Fine Gael, and he paused for a moment and he said, well, maybe it was because Mr Dukes was a good salesman. He also outlined the payment which he gave when he was contacted by Michael Lowry to set up a meeting with John Bruton. He said that Mr Bruton came to his home, they spent about an hour, it was a brief meeting, they had a cup of tea, and afterwards he agreed to pay £100,000 to Fine Gael. There was also another light moment. He described, he was asked about a payment to Kieran Haughey, and he said, well, he paid money for the services of Celtic Helicopters. He also paid him a bonus of £8,000, and the senior counsel asked him, well, you also gave him £100. What was that for? Then there was general laughter in the tribunal room, and he said, well, perhaps Mr Haughey gave me a loan of £100.
Well, how did Mr Dunn, going back to Mr Haughey, Mr Charles Haughey, how did Mr Dunn describe the approach made to him allegedly on behalf of Charles Haughey?
Well, it was probably about an hour into his evidence this afternoon that he was then, the senior counsel turned to the contributions which he made to Mr Haughey. Mr Dunn said that Noel Fox, who was a close friend of his, who was trustee of Dunn Stores, told him that he had been approached by Des Traynor, a friend of Mr Haughey's, to say that Mr Haughey was in financial difficulty and that a number of people were trying to raise around £700,000 for Mr Haughey. He described it, they were trying to raise money to relieve Mr Haughey of his financial difficulties. Mr Dunn said he didn't ask what those difficulties were, and the tribunal certainly wasn't told this afternoon. He then said, I remember thinking at the time, and he stopped again at this point and looked at the chairman of the tribunal as if to wonder what he should do, and he said, well, at the time I remember thinking, if Mr Haughey is looking for confidentiality, I think Mr Haughey is making a huge mistake. Christ picked 12 apostles and one of them crucified him. He said, for confidentiality reasons, I decided to pay the money myself. So that's where we are.
Charlie Bird in Dublin Castle, thank you very much for talking to us.
In London, rail and air